The grand halls of the imperial palace echoed with whispers and sidelong glances as Princess Alta walked past. Her silver-tinted skin and violet eyes marked her as pure royal blood, but these days, those features brought more shame than pride. Infertile, the royal physicians had declared last week. The word followed her like a shadow, turning her from the empire's cherished heir into its greatest disappointment. At 22 cycles old, Alta should have shown signs of fertility like all royal females before her, but her body remained dormant. Emperor Reed sat on his crystal throne, his face carved from stone, as he watched his daughter approach. The morning light streaming through the massive windows made the crown on his head sparkle, but his eyes remained dark and cold. "The arrangements have been made," he announced, his voice filling the throne room. "You will be given as a gift of goodwill to the Earth diplomat, James Miller. This will strengthen our ties with the humans while ensuring you have a—" He paused, searching for words, meaningful purpose. Alta kept her head high, though her heart sank to her feet. She had expected punishment for her failure, but exile disguised as diplomacy seemed unusually cruel, even for her father. "When do I leave?" she asked, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Tomorrow. The human ships await in orbit." One day, they were giving her one day to leave behind everything she'd ever known. Alta nodded stiffly and turned to go, but her father's voice stopped her. "You have disappointed your people, Alta. At least in this way, you might serve the Empire one final time." The words cut deep, but she refused to show pain. Instead, she walked out with measured steps, her ceremonial robes trailing behind her like broken dreams. In her quarters, Alta found her belongings already packed into sleek metal containers. Her servants avoided her eyes as they moved around, preparing for her departure. Only her old caretaker, Mira, dared to approach. "They're wrong about you, child," Mira whispered, her wrinkled hands gentle on Alta's shoulders. "The humans, they see things differently. Perhaps that's not such a bad thing." Alta wanted to believe her, but years of imperial education had taught her that humans were primitive beings who had somehow stumbled into space travel. They were useful for trade and technology exchange, but hardly equals. That night, she stood at her window, watching the three moons rise over the capital city. The spires of crystalline buildings reached toward the stars, their lights twinkling like fallen constellations. This view had been hers since birth. Tomorrow, it would belong to her brother, Prince Thorn, who at 16 cycles old had already proven his worth by passing the fertility tests. Morning came too quickly. Alta found herself in the Imperial shuttle bay, surrounded by officials who couldn't hide their relief at her departure. Her father didn't come to say goodbye. Only Mira stood there, pressing a small crystal pendant into her hand. "Your mother wore this," Mira said softly. "She always said it brought her luck." The mother Alta had never known, who died giving birth to her. Alta clutched the pendant tightly, her first and last connection to the woman who might have loved her regardless of her flaws. The human ship that waited in orbit was nothing like the elegant imperial vessels. It was bulky, practical, and entirely ungraceful. Like its makers, Alta thought with a mix of dread and resignation. James Miller waited at the airlock. He wasn't what she expected. Tall for a human, with kind eyes and a gentle smile that seemed genuine. He bowed slightly, a gesture that showed he'd studied their customs. "Welcome, Princess Alta. I hope you'll find Earth to your liking." She studied him carefully, this man who was to be her keeper in exile. He didn't look at her with pity or disgust, just quiet respect and perhaps a hint of curiosity. As the airlock closed behind her, sealing her fate, Alta squared her shoulders. She might be leaving in shame, but she would not let them see her break. She was still a princess of the Empire, fertile or not, and she would face her future with dignity. What she didn't know then was that this ending was actually just the beginning of a much bigger story. Earth was nothing like the crystal cities of home. Alta stood at the window of James's apartment in Geneva, watching rain fall for the first time in her life. Water, freely falling from the sky. It seemed impossible, Yet there it was. 3 months had passed since her arrival. James had been surprisingly kind, giving her space and time to adjust. He lived simply for a diplomat, in a comfortable but modest apartment with views of the lake and mountains. No servants, no grand halls, just quiet dignity and an endless supply of something he called coffee. "Would you like to try some?" James asked, noticing her watching him prepare his morning drink. She nodded, curious despite herself. The bitter liquid was shocking at first, but like many things on Earth, it grew on her. Life settled into an unexpected routine. James worked at the diplomatic center during the day, while Alta explored her new world through books and videos. She learned that humans, despite their apparent simplicity, had created art that moved her to tears and music that made her heart soar. Then came the day of her scheduled medical checkup. The human doctors had insisted on it, wanting to ensure Earth's atmosphere wouldn't harm her. Alta had resisted at first, remembering the shame of imperial examinations, but James gently convinced her it was necessary. Dr. Lisa Park was different from the imperial physicians. She asked questions, listened carefully, and explained everything she was doing. The medical bay was warm and bright, nothing like the cold chambers back home. "I'll need to run some standard tests," Dr. Park said, holding up a small device. "It won't hurt." Alta tensed as the scanner moved over her body, expecting the usual announcement of her failure. Instead, Dr. Park frowned at the readings, then scanned again. "This is interesting," she said, studying the results. "Princess Alta, who told you you were infertile?" The question hit like a physical blow. The imperial physicians. They ran extensive tests. Dr. Park shook her head. "Well, either their equipment is very different from ours, or—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "They were wrong. According to these readings, you're perfectly capable of bearing children. In fact, your reproductive system appears to be in excellent health." The room seemed to spin. Alta gripped the examination table, her knuckles turning pale silver. "That's impossible. They tested me dozens of times." "Medicine isn't just about tests," Dr. Park said gently. "It's about understanding. We've learned a lot about your people's biology through our exchange programs. Your reproductive cycle is different from humans, yes, but it's not incompatible with fertility." That evening, Alta sat in the apartment's small garden, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors she'd never seen at home. James found her there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked, settling beside her. The words spilled out, her shame, her exile, the years of believing she was broken. James listened quietly, his presence steady and comforting. "The thing about Earth," he said finally, "is that we learned long ago that different doesn't mean wrong. Your people's biology evolved for your world, just as ours did for Earth. Maybe the problem wasn't you at all." Alta looked at him then, really looked at him. In the fading light, she saw not the primitive being she'd first assumed, but a man of wisdom and kindness. Something shifted in her heart, like a flower turning toward the sun. "James," she said softly, "I think I'm starting to understand why the universe brought me here." He smiled, and for the first time since leaving home, Alta felt truly seen. Not as a failed princess, but as herself. That night, she wrote in her diary, "Perhaps exile isn't about being sent away from home, but about finding a new one. And perhaps love, like fertility, only needs the right conditions to bloom." She didn't know then that her personal discovery would soon shake the foundations of an empire. For now, she simply savored the feeling of being whole, watching Earth's single moon rise over a world that was becoming more like home with each passing day. The news broke like a thunderstorm across 2 worlds. Alta was pregnant. The medical confirmation had come just that morning, and James had held her as she cried tears of joy. But their happiness was about to be overshadowed by events unfolding across the stars. The imperial palace was in chaos. Prince Thorn, Alta's younger brother and heir to the throne, had died in what officials called a tragic racing accident. His personal spacecraft had malfunctioned during a routine flight, exploding in the upper atmosphere of their homeworld. Alta received the news via an encrypted message from Mira, her old caretaker. "The palace whispers of sabotage," Mira wrote. "But there's more. Your father is ill, very ill. The royal physicians say he won't last the year." And now, the message trailed off, but Alta knew what it meant. The imperial succession laws were absolute. Only those of proven fertility could inherit the throne. It was meant to ensure the continuation of the royal line. With Thorn dead, and Alta now probably fertile, she was suddenly the only legitimate heir to an empire that had cast her aside. James found her staring at the message, one hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. "This changes everything, doesn't it?" he asked quietly. "They threw me away," Alta whispered, "called me worthless. And now," she looked up at him, her violet eyes fierce, "now they'll want me back." As if summoned by her words, the communication system chimed. A holographic image appeared. Lord Baron, her father's chief advisor. His face was a mask of political smoothness. "Princess Alta," he bowed slightly. "News of your condition has reached us. The Emperor requests your immediate return home. A royal ship is already on its way." Alta stood tall, channeling every lesson in royal bearing she'd ever learned. "How convenient that I'm suddenly wanted now that Thorn is dead." Lord Baron's smile didn't waver. "Surely you understand your duty to the Empire. Your father is unwell. The people need their princess." "Their princess." Alta's laugh was sharp. "The same princess you declared unfit and sent away. The one you gave away like an unwanted pet. Past misunderstandings can be forgotten," Baron said smoothly. "Your place is here, with your people." James stepped forward, placing himself slightly in front of Alta. "Her place is where she chooses it to be. Earth has granted her citizenship and diplomatic protection." Baron's face darkened. "This is an imperial matter, Mr. Miller. Earth would do well to remember its place. And the Empire would do well to remember that times have changed." Alta said, "I am not the same person you sent away. I carry not just the heir to the throne, but the future of two worlds." After the transmission ended, Alta sank into a chair, trembling. James knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Whatever you decide," he said, "I'm with you. We're with you." His hand joined hers over their unborn child. That night, unable to sleep, Alta walked to their balcony. The lights of Geneva sparkled below, so different from the crystal towers of home, yet now just as dear to her heart. She thought of her father, lying ill in his grand chambers, of Thorn, her bright, ambitious brother, now gone forever, of the empire that had shaped her, rejected her, and now demanded her return. Her child moved within her, a flutter so faint she might have imagined it. This tiny life, proof of both her fertility and her freedom, had suddenly become the center of a galactic power struggle. "I won't let them use you," she whispered to her unborn child. "Whatever happens, you'll be more than just an heir. You'll be loved." In the distance, a shooting star streaked across Earth's sky. Alta watched it fall, knowing that somewhere out there, an imperial ship was already racing toward Earth. The game of succession had begun, and she was no longer just a discarded princess. She was the key to an empire's future. But first, she had to survive what was coming. The first attempt came at breakfast. Alta's food scanner, a gift from the suspicious Earth security team, flashed red. The morning pastry, delivered from her favorite cafe, contained traces of a poison lethal to her species. "That's the third try this month," James said, his face grim as he contacted their security detail. "They're getting bolder." Alta pushed the plate away, her appetite gone. 6 months pregnant now, she felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier each day. Earth's government had moved them to a secure compound after the second assassination attempt, but their enemies were persistent. "Another royal ship entered orbit this morning," James reported, checking his security feeds. "This one claims to carry your cousin, Lord Dex." Alta's lips tightened. Dex always wanted the throne. He must be desperate now that I'm carrying the true heir. Their living room had become a command center of sorts. Screens displayed security feeds, diplomatic messages and news from both Earth and the Empire. Reports of unrest in the imperial capital grew daily. Nobles taking sides, military units pledging loyalty to different factions. A gentle kick from her unborn child made Alta smile despite the tension. The baby was strong, active, a fighter already. Human doctors monitored the pregnancy closely, amazed by how the child showed traits of both species. It was unprecedented, this human imperial hybrid, and its very existence was reshaping galactic politics. Ambassador Chen is here, their security chief announced through the intercom. James nodded. They'd been expecting this visit. The Earth diplomat entered, carrying a thick folder. The Council has reached a decision, she said without preamble. Earth will officially support Princess Alta's claim to the throne. The words hung in the air like thunder before lightning. Earth had been neutral until now, claiming the succession was an internal imperial matter. What changed? James asked. Intelligence reports, Chen replied. The faction opposing the princess has been making deals with the Rim worlds, promising them imperial territories in exchange for support. We can't allow the Empire to fall into their hands. Alta stood, walking to the window. Beyond the compound's walls, she could see the mountains where she'd first learned to love Earth's wild beauty. So I'm the lesser evil. You're the legitimate heir, Chen corrected. And you understand both worlds. The Council believes you could bridge the gap between Earth and the Empire, create lasting peace. A message flashed on the main screen. Mira's secret channel. Alta's heart stopped as she read it. My father is dead, she announced, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Lord Baron claims temporary regency until the succession is settled. James was instantly at her side, supporting her as she swayed slightly. Are you all right? I have to be. Alta straightened, one hand on her belly. My child will not inherit a war-torn empire. Ambassador Chen was already on her communicator, issuing rapid orders. We need to move quickly. Baron will try to consolidate power. Princess, we should get you to the secure facility in the mountains. No. Alta's voice cut through the room like a laser. I'm tired of hiding. My father sent me away because he thought me weak. Baron and his allies think they can frighten me into submission. They're all wrong. She turned to face them, and for a moment, both James and Chen saw what her enemies feared, not just a princess, but a queen in the making. I will address both worlds, she declared. Tonight, let everyone see that the heir to the Empire stands on Earth's soil by choice, not exile. Let them see that I carry the future in my body and the strength of two worlds in my heart. As her allies rushed to prepare for the broadcast, Alta caught James's proud smile. She'd come so far from the shamed princess who'd arrived on Earth. She was ready now, ready to fight for her child's birthright, ready to change an empire. The game of succession was entering its final phase, and Alta intended to win. Not just for herself, but for the new future she could see rising like Earth's sun over imperial stars. The data chip had arrived hidden inside Mira's last gift, a traditional imperial birthing charm. Alta turned it over in her hands, remembering her old caretaker's final message. The truth will set our people free. Now, 8 months pregnant and surrounded by Earth's most advanced computers, Alta prepared to uncover what Mira had risked her life to send. The old woman had disappeared shortly after smuggling out the chip, presumably taken by Baron's forces. The encryption is breaking, James said, watching lines of code scroll across the screen. He'd called in Earth's best data experts, working day and night to crack the Imperial security. The files opened like a flower of secrets. Medical records, private communications, security footage, all spanning the years before Alta's exile. As she read, her hands began to shake. They lied, she whispered. All of them. The fertility tests. They were altered. James leaned in, reading over her shoulder. The evidence was clear. A systematic conspiracy to falsify Alta's medical results, making her appear infertile when she was perfectly healthy. But why? He asked. Why go to such lengths? Alta's fingers flew across the screen, diving deeper into the files. Here, communications between Baron and the Imperial Medical Chief. They knew my father was ill, even then. They wanted to control the succession. The plan unfolded before them like a poisonous map. Baron and his allies had manipulated everything. They'd known Alta would be too strong-willed as Empress, too difficult to control. By declaring her infertile, they could force her removal and place the younger, more malleable Thorn on the throne. They didn't count on Earth's medicine proving them wrong, James said softly, or on us falling in love. More revelations followed. Thorn's death hadn't been an accident. He'd discovered the truth about Alta's exile and threatened to expose it. Baron had eliminated him, probably hoping to blame his death on Earth sympathizers. The Imperial Council needs to see this, Alta said, her voice hard with anger. Every noble house, every military commander, they all need to know how they were deceived. A kick from her baby made her pause, reminding her to stay calm. The child seemed to sense her moods these days, responding to her emotions with movements of its own. It's risky, James warned. Baron still controls most of the Imperial communication networks. He'll try to discredit the evidence, claim it's Earth propaganda. Then we'll use his own methods against him. Alta's violet eyes gleamed with purpose. The Imperial nobility values tradition above all else. What if we broadcast the evidence during the Rising Moon ceremony? The Rising Moon ceremony was sacred in Imperial culture, a time when all nobles gathered to renew their oaths of loyalty. By ancient law, no violence or deception was permitted during the ceremony. Even Baron wouldn't dare interfere with the broadcast. We'll need help from inside the palace, James said, already planning. Someone who can access the ceremonial broadcasting systems. Alta smiled, touching the birthing charm Mira had sent. I think we already have it. Mira wouldn't have gone silent unless she had a plan. She's waiting for the right moment, just like this data chip was waiting for us. As they worked through the night, preparing the evidence for broadcast, Alta felt a strange peace settle over her. The truth about her infertility had finally set her free from old doubts and shame. Your grandfather, she told her unborn child, would have loved to know the truth. He died believing he had failed his bloodline, when really, he was the one betrayed. James wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands joining hers over their child. We'll make it right, he promised. For all of them. Alta nodded, watching the Earth's moon rise outside their window. Soon, during a similar moonrise on her homeworld, the truth would finally emerge. Baron and his conspirators would face justice, and the Empire would learn that their discarded princess had never been infertile, only inconvenient to those who sought power for themselves. The real game was just beginning. The Rising Moon ceremony began as it had for 10,000 years. Nobles gathered in the Grand Crystal Hall, their ceremonial robes shimmering under the light of 3 rising moons. Lord Baron stood at the Emperor's empty throne, ready to begin the loyalty oaths. Then the screens flickered to life. Alta's face appeared, her silver skin glowing with the healthy radiance of late pregnancy. The nobles gasped. Seeing their exiled princess broadcast into the sacred ceremony was unprecedented. My people, she began, her voice clear and strong. Today you'll learn the truth that was hidden from all of us. Before Baron could order the transmission cut, the evidence began playing. Medical records, secret meetings, the real data from Alta's fertility tests. Everything displayed on the massive screens surrounding the hall. The nobles watched in growing horror as the conspiracy unfolded. In the confusion, Mira emerged from her hiding place among the servants. She'd spent months concealed in the palace, waiting for this moment. With practiced speed, she locked down the communication systems, preventing Baron from calling his troops. The princess speaks truth, she called out, her old voice carrying through the hall. I witnessed it all. Baron's face twisted with rage. This is Earth trickery. They've corrupted our princess, filled her head with lies. The only lies, came a new voice, were yours. Military Commander Ash stepped forward, his medals gleaming. We've verified the evidence. It's genuine. You betrayed not just the princess, but the empire itself. The hall erupted into chaos. Some nobles drew weapons, others shouted accusations. Centuries of political rivalries exploded into open conflict. On Earth, Alta watched through secure feeds, gripping James's hand as her people chose sides. Commander Ash had pledged his largest fleet to her cause, but other military leaders remained loyal to Baron. Multiple ships are powering weapons, Earth's defense monitor reported. The Imperial fleet is dividing. They wouldn't dare, James said. Civil war would tear the Empire apart. But they did dare. The first shots were fired over the Imperial capital. Baron's supporters attacking Ash's ships. The night sky lit up with energy weapons and explosions. Alta stood, despite her pregnancy making movement difficult. Open a channel to all ships, she ordered. Both sides. Her image appeared on every Imperial vessel. Look at what you're doing, she called out. Our people's blood spills in space while our enemies watch and wait. Is this how the Empire falls? Not to outside forces, but to our own pride and anger. The fighting paused, if only briefly. Alta continued, letting them see her pregnant form clearly. I carry the future of our bloodline. A child who will unite not just noble houses, but worlds. Will you destroy the empire this child should inherit? In the Crystal Hall, Commander Ash seized the moment. Lay down your weapons, he ordered. Honor the ancient laws. No blood may be shed during the rising moon. Baron's supporters hesitated, tradition warring with loyalty. One by one, weapons lowered. Even Baron's most devoted followers couldn't bring themselves to break laws as old as the Empire itself. Arrest them all, Ash commanded, pointing at Baron and his closest conspirators. They'll face imperial justice for their crimes. On Earth, Alta finally allowed herself to sit, exhausted but relieved. It's not over, she said to James. There will be trials, reorganization, so much work to do. But the fighting has stopped, he reminded her gently. You prevented civil war. Their baby kicked strongly, making Alta smile despite her fatigue. We all did, she corrected, including the child in her victory. Earth's support, Mira's courage, Commander Ash's honor, and this little one, giving me strength when I needed it most. Reports began flowing in from across Imperial space. Most military units were declaring for Alta, accepting her claim as the true heir. The nobles who had supported Baron were surrendering, asking for mercy. A new day was dawning for the Empire. But first, Alta had another crucial task, delivering the child who had become a symbol of hope for two civilizations. Ready for the next challenge? James asked softly. Alta placed her hand over her belly, feeling their baby move. Together, she answered. We'll face it together. It's a girl, announced Dr. Park, holding up the newborn princess who entered the universe with a strong cry that seemed to echo across two worlds. The baby's skin had a subtle silver sheen like her mother's, but her eyes were a striking blend of human brown and imperial violet. Alta lay exhausted but triumphant in the medical chamber, specially designed to accommodate both Earth and imperial birthing traditions. James held her hand, tears streaming down his face as he looked at their daughter. She's perfect, he whispered. The baby was placed in Alta's arms and immediately settled against her mother's chest. News of the birth spread across Earth and the Empire at light speed. In the imperial capital, celebration lights filled the crystal towers. On Earth, crowds gathered outside diplomatic centers, cheering for the first human imperial child in history. What shall we name her? James asked softly. Alta smiled, looking down at their daughter. Luna, she said, after Earth's moon that watched over us during our darkest times and brought us hope. 2 weeks later, Alta stood before the Imperial Council, Luna cradled in her arms. The great hall had been transformed. Earth delegates sat alongside Imperial nobles, a visible sign of the changes to come. The old empire dies today, Alta declared, her voice strong. But a new one rises in its place, one built on truth, not deception, on unity, not division. She presented the new constitution, crafted by both human and imperial legal experts. It preserved the best of imperial traditions while incorporating Earth's democratic principles. The throne would remain hereditary, but power would be shared with an elected council. Lord Baron and his conspirators watched from their prison cells as Alta was crowned empress. Their trials would come later, but for now, this was a time for healing and renewal. Commander Ash stepped forward, leading the traditional loyalty oath. But this time, it was different. We pledge not just to the crown, he said, but to the principles it now represents. To justice, truth, and the unity of all peoples under the stars. As the nobles and delegates repeated the oath, Luna stirred in her mother's arms. Her tiny hand reached up, catching a beam of sunlight that streamed through the crystal dome. The light scattered, creating a rainbow that danced across the hall. A sign, whispered the old nobles. The stars themselves blessed this new beginning. James stood proudly beside his wife and daughter, no longer just a diplomat, but prince consort of the empire. He'd helped establish new trade routes, educational exchanges, and cultural programs between Earth and imperial worlds. Mira, restored to her position and honored for her courage, smiled from her place near the throne. Your mother would be proud, she told Alta softly. She always said the empire needed change. Now her granddaughter will lead that change. As the ceremony ended, Alta and James took Luna to the palace gardens. The 3 moons were rising, while Earth shone brightly in the evening sky, their daughter's dual heritage written in the stars themselves. We have so much work ahead, Alta said, watching Luna sleep peacefully. Rebuilding trust, establishing new systems, making sure both our peoples benefit from this union. James wrapped his arms around them both. And we'll do it together. Luna will grow up understanding both worlds, showing everyone that differences can become strengths. The baby stirred, opening her unique eyes to look up at her parents. In her face, they saw the future, not just of a family or an empire, but of 2 civilizations learning to grow together. Alta touched the crystal pendant that had traveled with her from exile to triumph, from unwanted princess to empress, she mused. And all because they were wrong about me being infertile. No, James corrected gently. All because you were strong enough to build something new from your pain. The fertility was just the key that opened the door. Luna made a small sound, as if agreeing with her father. Above them, stars twinkled in the imperial sky, while Earth glowed like a jewel of hope. The story of the infertile princess was over. The story of Empress Alta, her earthborn prince, and their star-blessed daughter was just beginning. And it promised to be the greatest tale the empire had ever known.